All right, so today we're jumping into something weird. Imagine your classic fantasy story, but instead of fighting dragons, the heroes and their weapons are having a full-blown existential crisis. Forget quests, we're talking about philosophical baggage. Let's get into it. I mean, it's a great question, right? What does happen when the tools of a story get tired of just being tools? Well, things get super meta, they get really anxious, and honestly, it gets pretty hilarious. So our journey into this whole mess begins not with a hero, but with his weapon. And let me tell you, this is no ordinary hammer. This is a deeply unsatisfied literary critic. I mean, the absurdity here is just perfect. You're expecting something like Thor's hammer, right? A symbol of pure, mighty force. But what you get is a tool that thinks the plot is a bit derivative and maybe a little too much like improvisational jazz. Yeah, you heard that right. You can just feel the exhaustion in that line, can't you? The hammer is just bored. It signed up for epic battles, for a clear plot, but instead it's stuck in what it feels is just the same old song and dance over and over again. And this is where it gets really wild. The hammer is totally self-aware. It's not just complaining about the story. It's straight up accusing the author of being a linguistic Loki, making things confusing just for the fun of it. That little at the end, chef's kiss. And this is the moment it all clicks, the dawning horror. The critic suddenly realizes it's not in the audience, it's on the stage. The hammer is now a self-aware character, trapped inside the very story it finds so incredibly frustrating. Okay, so if the hammer is all about frustration, our next character takes things in a different direction. Let's talk about the assassin, who's basically less of a person and more just a walking, talking panic attack. So yeah, forget everything you know about stealthy killers. This assassin's main state of being is pure, unfiltered anxiety. They call themselves an existential wreckage, which has got to be the least intimidating job title for an assassin in history. And this is what their world looks like. It's a total fog, an unknown present, just a broken system where your identity is another mask you put on, and the only thing that feels real is the anxiety simmering underneath it all. And empathy? Nope. The brain just hits a wall before it can even get there. Of course, you can't have a fantasy meltdown without some knights, right? But, let's just say their shining armor is feeling pretty heavy with the weight of consciousness. So meet our first knight. He's not even sure he's a person so much as a symbolic walking nervous system, and he has one huge question. Given all this chaos, why would anyone choose to be born into it? A fair point, Sir Knight. A fair point. He's just amazed at how the brain works, how it just keeps going. Even when everything is a disaster and fear is telling it to shut down, it just pushes on, preserving a life that makes absolutely no logical sense. And right when you think you're kind of on the same page with him, he just drops this. The definition of the sensory organs of a jellyfish. Why? Who knows? It's that kind of story. Now, our second knight, he's way less philosophical and a lot more just plain annoyed. He came here for a fight, a good old-fashioned war. Instead, he's stuck in a place where people complain that the analogies are too humid and nobody wants to actually throw down. You can just hear his frustration, right? He's surrounded by these mumbling philosophers, all debating abstract ideas. All he wants to do is hit something with a sword. Is that really so much to ask? And then, after all that ranting, he just ends with this perfect deadpan punchline. It's the ultimate sigh from a guy who showed up for a war and walked into a philosophy seminar. And really, this is what it all comes down to. This is the one question humming under every single complaint and anxious thought from all our characters. If the story doesn't make sense and the fight is just an argument, then what is the actual point? So what's the answer? Well, according to an archer we find on guard duty, it all boils down to one single problem. And it's not the monsters or the writer. It's us. More specifically, it's the weird, self-sabotaging game our own mind is constantly playing with itself. And he lays it all out. First, our mind just piles up anxiety like a bunch of useless luggage. Then, it actively hides what we know to be true from ourselves. It just waits for our own little story, our own delusions to inevitably fall apart. And when it does, it's a huge, dramatic collapse. And so we end up right back where we started, with this huge, unanswered question. If everything is just a reaction to random chaos, both inside our heads and out in the world, then what is the point of any of it? The text gives no answer. It just leaves you right there, stuck in the existential muck, with a complaining hammer, an anxious assassin, and some very, very confused knights.